Sí, de hecho también te iba a preguntar eso, que si tú me indicabas ya la transmisión, porque se pone a las 4 y es pasadas de las 4.
Sí. Acabo y ya vamos.
Bueno, entonces lo...
Sí, gracias. Entonces,
No, ya, sí. No. Mira, la idea de Ana es que se conecten al streaming para que vean. Y la idea de Ana es que cuando tengan presentación, pues ahí sí pueden interactuar, pueden abrir el micrófono. Si quieres mover la cámara, esta es mi camarita de la... Mira, Isa, es la señal. Ya está grabando, ¿eh?
sí.
So the book launch is tomorrow. In Spanish. Yeah. Now there's the Spanish. Apparently the translation is great. Okay. That's what people say. What's the
Oye, los que son leyes profesión, yo no me sentaría tan.
I think ella sí people connected or like half of the audience will be online. So they're watching this training. And then for the Q&A session, they can just so session will be on like we can start whenever. And I just want to make sure.
Ya nada más hay que estar pendiente de los micrófonos.
Sí.
Bien, Tania, pero no nos dimos. Pues yo les pedí que vinieran. Sí, también nos mandaron en el.
¿le cambias?
Cuando mienten con la prensa.
Sí.
Muy bien, pues muchas gracias. Vamos a empezar de una vez. Va a hacer una presentación el doctor Rogers y después de la presentación vamos a pasar a una sesión de respuestas. Muchas gracias. Might start, whatever.
Thanks for coming, everybody. So what I'm going to do today is present a purchase in the study of Instagram. So we're talking about Instagram platform. And I'll be talking about visual media analysis more generally. So of course, Instagram is the social media platform that has been most associated with online image analysis, at least over the last few years. And so I'll concentrate on Instagram, and then what I'll do is I'll talk about visual media analysis more generally. So this is the outline of the talk. I'll start with the notion of meta picture. So this is a theoretical idea, methodological idea as well, which is an approach to both studying but also visualizing social media images. So I'll start there, and then I'll talk about Instagram studies. So how do you study Instagram? How it's studied? I'll focus on two schools of thought, if you will. Studies. One is Instagramism, and the other one is Instagrammatics. So one is a more qualitative tradition, and the other one is quantitative tradition. And then after that, I'll talk about different ways to, or different approaches to visual media analysis. I'm going to show you 11 different ways to do visual media analysis. So you see them on screen. I'll talk about the study of image similarity, image trends and vernaculars, the dominant image presence and absence. And then I'll conclude by talking about where this particular approach fits into other approaches. So I want to start with a number of concepts. These concepts are from the literature, and there are a number of objects of study in visual media analysis online, and they move from the micro to the macro. So I'm listing them here. So the first one is digital visual artifacts. So this is the most specific micro level of study. So these include things like emojis, GIFs, reactions, buttons, so this level of analysis. Then there's something that's called digital visual media. This is the study that includes especially formats. So image macros, memes, different kinds of specific or animated GIFs, different kinds of specific formats of visual media. And then there's a term called visual social media. And so this is the study of platforms that have images at their heart. So image-based social media platforms. So these can be image boards like 4chan. They can be social media platforms that are most associated with images like Instagram, Tumblr, or they could be sort of image platforms where people upload images. Then there's a term called social media images. So this is the study of all images on social media. It doesn't have to be specifically on platforms that are dedicated to images, but so this would then include Twitter. Twitter, images on Twitter, but it's not only associated. It's not image-based. And then there's the broadest term of them all. So far, this list. That's from Jimmy Rose, who wrote the Visual Methodologies, published by Oxford University Press. It's a very long book. She has a chapter in it called Digital Images, Digitally Analyzed. So what she means here are images that are not only online, or sort of made for the online, but also those that have been migrated. So digital images and digitized images. And so what I want to now do is turn to two overarching approaches to the study of the visual. And then the reason why I'm doing this is I'm introducing two approaches to study of Instagram. I'm also introducing an approach that seeks to unify these two. This is the meta approach. So generally speaking, in visual analysis, there are largely two broad ways of approaching. One is the hermeneutical tradition, interpretive tradition, art history, iconography. So it's about the study of symbols, meaning, representation, history of what an image means, represents, what it signifies. That's one tradition. And that is embodied in what I'll show you in this notion of Instagram. There's another tradition, also quite rich, a little bit newer, and that is info-viz, data. This is visualization. This is taking information or taking an images, and datifying, turning them into data, and then representing them as data. In a tradition, or increasingly it's associated with data science. So these are two very, very distinctive traditions. One is more interpretive, the other one is quantitative. Now, the notion of a meta picture is what this talk is entitled. Meta picture is defined, it's a term from William Mitchell. He did in 1954. And what it means is a picture in a picture. Meta picture is a picture in a picture. But what it does, at least for our purposes, is it allows you to take images and visualize them, keep the images in the visualization, and then rearrange them so that you build in a critical interpretation. So what it tries to do, the meta picture, at least in this reading, is it tries to allow for both close reading, the tradition of the interpreter, and a distant tradition of the visualization, the meta picture. It tries to unify, in some ways, the traditions of close reading, distant visualization, especially the data traditions associated with distant traditions associated with close reading. So what I want to do is I want to first talk about these two traditions. In two schools of thought, in Instagram studies, and talk about the study of Instagram a little bit more broadly as well. And then I'll return to the meta picture, show you, I think I have 11 different ways of studying social media and online media through the idea of a meta picture. Okay, so Instagram as an object of study has been always associated with the selfie from the very beginning. So the selfie is something that in some ways is sort of born of the platform. And so it was something also oftentimes quite playful, quite frivolous. The other idea that's associated with Instagram, well, not originally, is the microsleeve. Microsleeve was first used in connection with Twitter, but increasingly in connection with Instagram, especially with the rise of the influencer economy, the influencer marketing, influencer culture. Now, there are two kinds of labor that people oftentimes talk about when they talk about influencers, especially on Instagram. And one of them is visibility. So how is it that you work in order to set a particular scene, show yourself in a particular light? So this is the visibility. On the other side is what some scholars refer to as relational. That is, how do you relate to other users of the platform? How do you build a fan base, maintain a fan base? So this is the relation. So there's the one, the visibility, it's the staging, the scene, and the other one is the relation. Now, more recently, people have talked about a particular kind of aesthetic on Instagram. I'll show you that. But it is oftentimes referred to as a particular form of staging, of arranging, of setting a particular kind of scene. So this is especially in the work of knowledge. The second is this notion of Instagram. There are other, apart from influencers, there are other kinds of characters that are specific to Instagram. One of those is the digital nomad, the parapathetic, the sort of international global worker who takes pictures of the places where he or she is puts down the computer and goes to work. Oftentimes, the places where these digital nomads tend to go gradually transform themselves into Insta places that look good on Instagram. So there's an interaction between influencers and digital nomads and places they go, how where they go ends up looking like an Instagram aesthetic. Now, more recently, people have talked about the darker side of all of this. Dark side of sort of these lifestyle, etc. How difficult symptoms are. There's also the talk, a few terms that have been put into play recently. One is the engineered self, manufactured self. Of course, there's visibility labor on the one hand. And on the other hand, there's your profile, how good your profile is. Part of looks is not only the outward metrics. How many followers do you have? And then per post, how many interactions do you have per post? And then do the number of interactions you have per post correspond to the number of followers? If they don't, are you fake? This is one of the things that people are studying, rise of fake followers. The fake follower industry is the largest Instagram by far. The market is very large. And if you look into the market carefully, there are sort of more expensive, higher quality followers to purchase. These are the real people. And then there's a sort of cheaper end of the market where they might be real, but they're rather ephemeral. When you begin to get into the fake follower industry, or when influencers purchase them, there are a couple of problems. So one, this was a problem that came to light. It was 2019 article here, sorry, 2018 article in the New York Times, where a purge by Instagram, where they cleaned up a lot of dubious accounts, caused the number of followers of a lot of celebrities to suddenly drop. So there was a big question mark of how you actually purchased. So this is one thing. The other thing is that a lot of these sort of fake followers that have been purchased or otherwise acquired, they have an expiry date. So you need to continue to purchase, and you need to continue, and then the purchase doesn't end with followers because you want to keep your ratios. So you need to then buy fake likes and fake comments and on and on. By the way, this graphic here is not a meta picture. It's datafied, it's visualization. But what's interesting about it is that there's a cluster of accounts are resized. There's a cluster around 20%. For a larger Instagram account, that's an average number. So if you're much lower or much higher than around the 20%, it stands out. So the ones around 40%, there's a likelihood of purchasing, acquiring fake followers quite high. What's also interesting is if it's lower than 10%, you're actively grooming your account. You're trying to keep it really clean, which is also interesting. Okay, what I want to do now is move to these two schools of thought. Instagram, one is Instagramism. So Instagramism is a term that was coined in the scholar language, which refers to it as a particular kind of, or the study of a particular kind of aesthetic. And the aesthetic is symbolized in these images here, or these posts, these images, posts on Instagram here. What he argues is it's quite global. It's not something that is culturally specific or regionally specific or otherwise, but rather quite global. He identifies the sort of origin of it in a particular kind of slow lifestyle magazine, which is US based, called Kinfolk. And this is a particular kind of look and feel. You'll be familiar with it if you've heard of cottagecore or other kinds of idealized sort of lifestyle, rural lifestyle, where sort of it has a kind of slight hipster feel to it, but it's rural. Everything's homemade, sewn by hand. It's a slow lifestyle, and then sort of staged. He also talks about it as the way he analyzes it for collections of images as a style space, and how a particular post of images are quite similar to one another in terms of style. The style is this slow lifestyle. It's a staging aesthetic, so where there's a very specific kind of mise en scène, where you're producing a particular kind of look and a particular kind of arrangement to achieve that. Now, Instagrammatics is more from the visualization. So if this is the hermeneutic tradition, this is the more quantitative or the visualization tradition, where you take an Instagram post, turn them into data, and then you visualize them. So what you have here is visualization of the world, where you have dots that signify where people posted particular hashtags. And the hashtags, this is from 2015, this is after the US Supreme Court ruling in favor of same-sex marriage. And on Instagram, suddenly there were all these hashtags, posts saying love wins, love wins. Those were, then there was some reactionary hashtags, anti-hashtags saying Jesus wins. And this was a counter. So what you see here is the sort of distribution of or the geolocation, so the geotags, where these hashtags, these posts with these hashtags. So that here you query the Instagram API. And you query Instagram for the hashtags, and then you get posts back, and posts on Instagram have geotags and geolocations. So what I've done is talked about Instagram studies. It's about two schools of thought. Now I want to move to trying to merge or bridge these two schools of thought, from the Newton tradition, visualization tradition, through the idea of a meta picture as being something in between. And I want to do that in 11 ways. So I'm going to show you 11 different approaches to meta picturing in the study of visual media. So the first one is this. This is an output of a piece of software called Image Sorter. Image Sorter is an older software project. The more recent one is called Pick Arrange, which does the same thing. So it ingests folder of images and then arranges them by similarity. Similarity in this sense, in this case, is color. And what the developer of the software, this is López, what he says is what you're studying here is a style space. So the approach to its study is you group images according to similarity. Similarity in style. In this particular case, it's just color. This is the story. And so what we've done here is online, a lot of images are cropped, downsampled, pixelated, so they are low quality images. So in this particular way, we can sort of, because we're doing image similarity, we can sort of reunite these lower quality images to see which images have been downsampled. So this is a particular kind of grouping exercise to reunite. Second one is image trends. So what you see before you is 10 years of images returned for the query climate change and Google images. So you see the extent to which the types of images have changed over time, top of search engine returns. So what you see here is actually the pattern change. So I mean, what's interesting about it is, I mean, you could say that they're getting a little bit hotter. But what's interesting is that throughout there are no people. So you know, the imagery of climate change, the dominant imagery of climate change, at least seen through Google images, is one of the but scientific. The third one is image vernaculars. So I'll just tell you right from the outset that we're using an animated GIF here as a method demonstration. So the animated GIF shows you how you do this. So the image vernacular refers to the culture of use on a platform. So Instagram vernaculars, Twitter vernaculars, very, very different. TikTok. The way that people use the platform. And then you can see that by the types of images that are used for the same things as climate change. The types of images that are used for climate change are quite different depending on the platform. So this is a stacking technique where you vary the opacity of images. So you can see the top 10 images per platform. You can see the sort of the style imagery. So this is a cross-platform analysis, Facebook, Tumblr, Reddit. Same query, it's stacked. Dominant image analysis. So what you see here is again an output of a sort of pick range or image sorter where images are grouped by similarity. But it's different in this particular case because we have two images here. One before and then one after. The event is the announcement by the then President Trump that the US would pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. So the number of posts about with the hashtag Paris before the Trump announcement is there on the left, small amount, and then after the Trump announcement is there 1 month period. Those are the total number of pages. Then you see at a glance, there's a particular cluster. And if you zoom in on that cluster, you see what the dominant image is, the image most frequently posted in space. And that's the placard, Make Our Planet Great Again, which is a riff take on Trump's Make America Great. So this was a post by President Macron. So you see that that has become the dominant image, which is interesting, given that after the Trump announcement, that the reaction to it would be dominant. Image presence, and image absence. So what people may not have thought of is that on Wikipedia, there are different languages. And you might think that Wikipedia is quite universal, but actually, per language, if you look at the same article, they're quite different. So this is a comparison of the images of the same article, but in different languages. And the article in question here is the Srebrenica massacre or genocide. Now, this occurred in 1990. Where the Bosnian Serbs came into the town or safe haven, Dutch UN protected safe haven, Srebrenica, killed 8,000. And Bosnians. So what we did is we compared the Serbian article with the Bosnian and the Dutch article, because the UN battalion who was protecting Srebrenica was Dutch backed. What you see is very interesting is they have very different titles. So the Serbian is called Srebrenica Massacre. Bosnian is called Srebrenica Genocide. And the Dutch one is called The Fall of Srebrenica, as if it's about military. Very different. What I'm going to show you here are images. Some of them appear in all the articles, and some are missing. One is this one. That's the gravestone of a 13-year-old who was killed. And it appears on the Bosnian, but it doesn't appear on the Serbian, and it doesn't appear on the Dutch. And for the Bosnians, this is evidence of genocide. So it's this image presence, or it's interpretation of image presence, image absence in an image. Image quality. This is what you see in the middle is not a meta picture. Meta pictures are wrong. So images, certain images online, if you look behind them, so to speak, you can read the data that's embedded in the images. So the timestamp when the image was taken, for example, this is called the EXIF data. And there are other ways, there are other data types, or let's just call it metadata. But more specifically, it's EXIF. So this analysis is of the leading images that were taken and circulated online around the Gezi Park protests in Istanbul in 2014. So just a quick reviews. So the authorities there decided that they would build a mall in a park in the center of Istanbul. People came to protest, initially a green protest, so to speak. Then it turned into an anti-government protest. And there was violence. At the same time, there were a lot of, this was the time, 13, when the blogosphere was, when you had the rise of citizen journalism. So the claim was that the images that were circulated online were taken by pop-up journalists, citizen journalists, bloggers, who were challenging with their imagery the official accounts of what was happening. So what we did is we took, we see it here, it's top three images per day, but it's for a 40-day period. This is a very long scroll. The first thing that was interesting was that the images, actually the top three images after the first few days, were quite stable on the 40-day period. So that's the first thing to talk about specificity. But more importantly, what we did is we took those images, including a very iconic image of the lady in red in pepper spray. So if you look up in Google Images, lady in red, Istanbul, you'll see very famous. In any case, we took all these images and we checked their exit date. It turned out that they weren't taken by cheap cameras. They weren't taken by iPhones, but rather by high-end professional grade. So whilst there was a lot of citizen journalism, the top imagery was taken. So this was a bit of a contrast. It was made on the basis of looking up the price tags, the cameras that took pictures. So this is where we are so far. About 6 minutes. Image staining. Image staining. So what you see here is a full scroll of Google results page on an iPhone. So not just what you see in the whole screen. And then it's been stained different colors. And what they show is the moment when there is a traditional or organic result, which is gray. So you'll know it's a critique of Google. It's a Google. And the title of the article where this appears is called "The Top Result in Google." It's Google. So what it's about is that first you get Google Ads, and then you get Google Properties, and then you get, and finally, it's 36% way down to finally get a traditional result. So this is staining, but if you know this word, but it's a synonym, but it's different. It's also tarnishing, like tarnishes or stains the reputation. Image circulation analysis. Image circulation analysis. And so this is done with Google, with computer vision techniques, such as Google Vision. So it's interesting because most recently, the big hype now is generative AI. But 3 years ago, or the big hype was computer vision, which is AI. And what computer vision is what it's most associated with is you have images, you run them through vision software, and it labels them. And it labels them according to their formal properties, material. So it's sort of like a label painting. Oil on camera. I mean, it's the reality. It's oftentimes critiqued because it's not good at context. But that's one thing computer vision does. But the other thing that is, I think, slightly more interesting for analytical purposes, at least media studies, visual media analysis, is it shows where on the web the images have appeared, which other websites. So it shows circulation, the company that an image keeps. So you can see where it travels to. So you can, so what you have here, this particular one is, this image here is a labeling critique. But what you also have is you can see, for example, this is a project that we did. It was a Getty stock image collection called Leaning Collection. It's very famous. Came out about 5 years ago. And it's a set of images, stock images of women at work, otherwise empowering images. So what we did is we took the images from the collection, we ran them through vision to see where the images were being used, whether they were being used in the context in which they were meant to be used. It's empowering. They weren't. It's a short story. They were being used in all kinds of contexts, but not necessarily ones that Getty the Leaning Collection wanted. This particular analysis was actually written up in the New York Times. Type in New York Times, and type gritty. Image engagement. Image engagement. So this is visualization. It's a tree map. It's a meta picture, which shows posts on Facebook by alt-right pages. Alt-right pages. Resized according to the amount of engagement. So the larger the panel, the more interactions posts have received. So in the universe of alt-right pages, posts have received most engagement, image engagement. Image first post, and then these are posts. So we've also done a qualitative analysis on topics. So we talked about what kinds of posts these are, the alt-right. So the biggest one is anti-political correctness, there's anti-establishment, there's race realism, manosphere, etc. So these are all kind of sub-ideologies. So what you see is what types of posts, what types of ideologies or sub-ideologies animate this space or engage this. These are image emoji or image reaction associations. So this is from a Facebook page dedicated to the Syrian war. And what we've done is we've taken the images, the reactions to the images, and made a bipartite graph. So which emojis are associated with which images? Now, what's interesting about this is it's almost a qualitative analysis in the sense of you're showing the sentiment that people are attaching to images according to their reactions. You're also showing the complexity of reactions. It's not that the one dominates, it's that they're mixed reactions. So it shows these kinds of image reaction. Image removal. So this is an animated GIF again. It's in 2 different days. And the technique or the overall approach here, we call it platform perspectivism. This is a term that a colleague developed. We're using one platform to study the world. So what my colleagues did is they took a neo-Nazi image board on 4chan and extracted all the YouTube videos. And then for a number of days, they were looking to see whether they were there. And then after a major purge on YouTube, you could see what was removed. So this is one of the few cases where you actually have traces of what has been a lot of removal. You don't know what's been. They're all the claims that we removed today. Can we see it? So this is very interesting. They also looked into sort of technically how it was, what was removed. So it turns out that there weren't individual videos removed, but not channels. So they're trying to remove at scale. They're trying to solve problems at scale. Videos, which then would be that certain videos probably need, although these are fancy things. What's also interesting is what remained. It's like, oh, these weren't bad enough. So again, this is about in some ways the politics of war, and also this is quite agile work as well. It needs to be monitoring going on in order for you to capture the incentive. Okay, this is the last one. This is feed competition. This. And what I want to start with is the image on the lower left. Recognize this image on the lower left. Google image. Search term Egypt. This is the image that Eli Pariser used in his original TED Talk on the filter bubble. So the filter bubble, which is now the star, was coined by Eli Pariser in 2011. And it's a powerful argument. It's an argument against personalization, against the wrong results. It's an argument against what we call the invisible editing by search engines. So we don't know what we don't see. So, but what's interesting about it is this comparison. So he has 2 friends, the story tells us, he has 2 friends, and they both search for Egypt. And one gets crisis protests around the Egyptian revolution of 20. This is when this was done. The other one gets travel. And so it's, so this was so very disconcerting at the time. Now, I think we're this was Google. This was personalization. Personalization now has come, of course, to social media. So you see this famous piece called Blue Feed, Red Feed. So this is Facebook in the run-up to the 2016 US presidential elections. These are emulated, so simulated on the basis of lists of conservative sources, progressive sources, and what you would likely see on Facebook if you're a progressive or if you're a conservative. This ran for 3 or 4 years, very interesting. But they've improved it. Same platform has now moved to a stage or this outfit called markup. What they've done is they've recruited panels, sets of Facebook users who are self-identified consumers. They've installed browser plugins. They get their actual feeds. So we're getting actual feeds. It's actually quite cheap. We get actual feeds of self-declared blind. And you see also this is a kind of quality issue. That's strong purpose. Just evaluated by researchers as very dubious. So this is feed competition. This is how to put it on display, how to just. Okay. So just concluding really briefly. So what I've done is sort of introduced a lot of notions, and what I did is in this sort of visual media online, which this is an article. It's published in 2021 in the journal Big Data and Society. So go to it if you're interested. What I try to do with this idea of visual media online is to study all of these types of images, so from the micro buttons and things to formats to platforms driven by images to etc. So this is the idea of this visual media online analysis. This is trying to be all encompassing. And then in doing so, introducing this sort of visual media analysis, I tried to come up with a way of bridging quite a yawning divide between the hermeneutical tradition, visualization. Visualization sort of datafies images, and the hermeneutical tradition so de-datafy. So I'm trying to de-datafy images in some sense. Today's visualization culture and arrange them. Arranging them that builds in a kind of interpretation. So this is the idea of that. So that's it. Thanks for your attention. Slides.
No sé si tengan alguna pregunta, las pueden hacer en inglés, o bien no sé, no se la directamente, yo con mucho gusto lo puedo traducir sin problema.
Yeah, actually, in the dominant image analysis, what's the value of y-axis? I understand X was the opposition between Republicans and Democrats, but why the y-axis? What it means?
There are no axes.
I don't know axis. No. Okay, so what's the criteria of arrangement? Sorry, I think that was like an image plot. Yeah, so the horizontal one marks your position.
So So it's again, it's the same, it's an image sorter or pick range. It's grouping images by similarity.
Ah, okay, and the criteria of grouping was the composition similarity?
It's
Form?
huge.
Oh,
It's simpler than that. Now, I mean, there is another generation of image grouping software that does more, and it seeks to also take into account the content of images. But there is that one, but you're talking about the actually.
but G,
Yeah, it's different. This
one is Photoshop actually.
one's Photoshop.
Yeah, and I have another question. Sorry, it's perhaps quite technical, but why do you choose opacity if when in a stack mode you can choose standard deviation, you can choose median, you can choose percent. Why opacity?
It's big. Well, I mean, I suppose you could do a bunch of different.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, you're reducing subsequent images. You're reducing the capacity of subsequent images. You take the top 10 images, and then you stack them, and then you reduce the capacity by 10% of each. So you're getting you're taking into account the ranking. That's why. So ranking matters, and images are ranked by engagement. Engagement matters. That's why. So the vernacular in this particular sense is depicted according to the top 10 images ranked by engagement, where the higher you are at the top, the more of the image you get.
Okay, so the image don't have the same amount of opacity.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there, Professor. That was a fascinating talk. And if I understand well, sorry, I came a bit late. So you are showing us 11 ways in which we can use software or other digital tools to analyze images, right? I mean, being a methods professor myself, this comes quite handy for everyone. But the thing is that sometimes the students, graduate students, come with much more complex research questions about the image. So they are still concerned about representation and meaning. And sometimes methods professors grapple with the problem of how digital are traditional research methods like content analysis or quantitative analysis. What you're showing us here are ways of approaching images, and if not, please correct me, with software that already exists. So it's like we adapt our research questions to these tools so we can analyze platform vernaculars, newsfeed, how did you call it in the last one? Feed competition. So it's like you already have to know these concepts in order to have a better tool to understand that. Well, I guess it's two questions. The first, to what extent do these new and fascinating methods can coexist with the traditional methods of content analysis, discourse analysis, and visual analysis from other like theoretical approaches, from semiotics to linguistics and all that. And second, how likely is a normal graduate student to grasp these tools easily? Well, I'm only asking because if you lead like a lab, a digital methods lab, I suppose there is plenty of people working around these research projects, but you know, theses are made by individual students who struggle a lot. So if you had to give our students advice on how best to use these tools on their own, what would it be? Sorry if I.
No, I understand. Thank you very much. So the point of the talk was not to provide like software-driven solutions to anything. Rather, the idea was to try to bring together the hermeneutic tradition, the interpretive tradition of art history, etc., as well as the, let's call it the visualization tradition, info-based data science. And so to try to bridge the divide between those interested in close reading, those interested in distant. And so in order to do that, I introduced or reintroduced the notion of meta picture, which is mentioned. And this meta picture is a picture in a picture, whereby one retains original images for close reading purposes, then arranges them in a way that allows for critical reflection, distant. So this was the idea, and in order to achieve meta picturing, I introduced a number of different approaches to do that. Some of these approaches benefit from the use of software, and others. So the point wasn't like a kind of method-driven or software-driven presentation of object. It was rather, in fact, precisely this issue, which is when studying, especially social media images or images, how can you do it in a way that kind of retains it nowadays? Visualization is so big. How can you do it in a way where you actually retain the richness of interpretive tradition? So this is the answer to the first question. But in the second one, I think in general, sort of kind of advice. I mean, I advise students to come with their questions, research questions, and try to operationalize them into approaches. Now, I've given 11 different approaches. Of course, there are more. But once we have decent questions, I think they can be operational. I mean, I should operationalize them in ways in which they can sort of answer them. Also, so output it in ways like the ones that shown. So I think that my sort of general advice is for work to be questioned, research questioned, rather than data software.
Sorry, I was just asking because some people tend to be very fearful of big data or big things, and that scares students a lot, and they kind of claim, oh, this is too much for me to handle. But I guess I'm asking you to dispel those fears,
yeah,
and tell them whether they can do it on their own. Like if it's manageable for a single person to embark in one of these methods or approaches to, to incorporate to their own research.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I don't think any of these, maybe one could be regarded in the realm of sort of towards big-ish data, although not really. But I mean, most or almost all of these particular techniques require sort of extracting images from the web, putting them in a folder, and then uploading the folder to opening the folder in software or putting them in pre-game grids. Yeah, so no, all of these are actually, all of the ones that I showed are, they would be considered extremely simple by a data scientist. Like not even, so they all come from humanities research. So it's mostly non-technical. Yeah. So I mean, we normally have these like little micro workshops where we just open these photo images. This is the default. This is the default output. Image sorting.
Well, this is related. I have a question from someone who's watching us. I have a couple of questions of my own. So it says visual studies do they really need huge quantities of data, or can we work with very small databases?
Yeah.
That just like, and because not all of the students have access to tools or big data, and then we use free softwares.
Yeah, so I mean, all of these tools are non-proprietary. All of that I showed you. There's actually, it's quite low threshold. But it's interesting. So a lot of so recently there's been a lot of concern within digital research methods because of the closure of APIs, so the closure of all these different ways in which we collect data. And there's now this kind of call for renewed kind of small data approaches. And so taking the results of a query from approaches and just taking thumbnails, driving them one by one into a folder, taking a folder, putting it into this piece of software and visualizing this, which is this is done in spreadsheets. So indeed, small data approaches are becoming the new trend.
So Stephanie, did you over there, Stephanie? She's going to finish.
Okay.
She has small. So I was just going to ask you a couple of questions that are not related to exactly what you presented, but more to your practice of what you presented. So first question is, what are the most counterintuitive results that you have found? And when does the study of images become really heuristic? And I'm not saying that it's not, it's just that sometimes students want to do images because they find it cool. They have no further explanation. And so you as an expert, like I'd like to hear like a better explanation that it's super cool.
Well, I mean, from the original concepts that I put down, explained, certain platforms are image driven. So you would want to understand the relationship between, for example, agents. You might want to also similarly also talk about understand differences in aesthetics. So what makes an Instagram image versus. You also might want to study some of the leading image formats. I mean, if you look at engagement of media types on all platforms, you'll learn that the image is oftentimes the most engaged with media type. And of those formats of images, memes are the most engaged with image formats. So that is a rationale in itself to study. So that's one. So all of these little case studies have a counterintuitive finding. So this is the counterintuitive finding. This is that there are no humans. Might expect there to be. But on the other hand, maybe that's intuitive to some sort of environmental humanities researchers. Noticed that the style of the climate change discourse is quite scientistic and humanist. But nevertheless, I mean, this is somewhat counterintuitive as well, that there would be these glaring absent images. This was counterintuitive by Gezi Park because we thought the images that were strongly ones would be taken by citizen journalists, cheap cameras. This, to me, is not counterintuitive, but to others, I think that you don't encounter a natural or organic result until you scroll down to the percent of the page. So Google is engaged in self-dealing, most valuable real estate populates with its own problems. Yeah, I mean, you have to know a lot about the alt-right to understand this particular one. But nevertheless, what's interesting about this, which I didn't talk about, is, and we didn't know about, we didn't think about this at the time of this work, was that content moderation has a lot of effect on which posts remain, which are taken off. So, but this is very interesting to show what actually drives a social movement, what kind of ideology drives a social movement. So it might not be counterintuitive, but it's insightful. And I can go through them all, but most of them are counterintuitive. This one isn't, but I have one that is, so I've been doing work in war quite a lot. And what we did is we did an image circulation analysis comparison of images that circulate on Google, images that circulate on Yandex. What we found is that they're very, very different images for the same queries. And more specifically, the images, this is not counterintuitive, but it's interesting. The images that circulate on Google are independent Russian language images. Images circulate on Yandex, state-controlled ones. But Yandex is not a state-controlled. So Yandex is one of the Dutch companies. It's one of the few sort of brunette engines or platforms that sort of not controlled by the programs. In any case, the reason why we know that one is circulating more than the other is that the both types are circulating on Google and only one type is circulating. This was written about by journalists and political. So it was interesting enough to be taken up by journalists. So a lot of these techniques produce those sorts of
Thank you. And I have another question from someone who's watching. Professor, thank you very much. What kind of methodological reflexivity should emerge from the use of these methods of analysis? And then another one, please give us an example of discussions that can be created from one of these analysis methods.
On the question of reflexivity, in some ways, so reflexivity means a number of different things. But one of the things it means is that you're quite aware of certain limitations, or you're quite aware of the power of visualization. So, for example, this might seem really sort of objective or scientific, more believable. So yeah, you should be reflexive about the power of graphs. But in any case, they seem impressive, so therefore they carry more weight. So I think that and of course a lot of this work is you slip from time to time when you explain it. You only talk about as if it reflects what's happening in society when it's what's on Instagram, what's on Twitter. So you have to, and then the kinds of discussion. Can you repeat that? Because that was quite a sort of general.
Could you please give an example of discussions that can be created from one of
Yeah, sure. So in doing that bit, I mentioned this already, but this particular analysis of relations between images and reactions, or images and objects. So at first glance, it looks like this is a graph. This looks quite convincing. But what the discussion that I raised, the discussion point that I raised, is that this seemingly quantitative analysis is in fact qualitative. It's what I find quite exciting. So what you're doing is you're allowing these reactions to qualify feelings about of the particular images that you see. And then if you begin to zoom in, you might see particular kinds of patterns as well as particular kinds of patterns, which also raise different things. But what I thought was kind of interesting about this is that these are really heavy pictures, a lot of them. This Facebook page, Syrian war, by far the biggest reaction. So this is the actions, which of course is a whole field.
Thank you, Doctor. My question is, sorry, my English. What is the impact of the influencers and micro celebrities in the visual media analysis? We can say the content is more organic and they have influence in the users with their image.
So influencers, are very impactful in a variety of ways. So one way is of course tone setting, style making. But another way, and this is what I like to do in the study, So I like to study them, not, well, I study them, I like to study how I like to study them, and that is, I study them in terms of how they react to social issues. So one study recently that we did was about what influencers said about COVID vaccines. And the research question is, to what extent these influencers be considered socially responsible? You know, are they still sort of merely acting as influencers to show style? B, are they passing along misinformation, problematic information? C, are they kind of actively debunking us? Are they, what kind of influence are they having with respect to something quite important? So this is how I like to study it. This one. And I mean, when you query social media for climate change, the top posts are more likely, amongst the top posts, more likely are influencers. Or I like to call them platforms. They do very well on the platform, and the platforms do very well on that. So you'll find them in and then you're able to evaluate what they have to say about
I have a question. This last idea that you talk about images getting like data, like you can get data out of images. I was thinking kind of that with AI, it kind of changes the game because AI generates images out of data. So it's kind of like a reversive effect or something. And with this kind of tracking of reacts, for example, I remember that on Twitter, there was an image of Donald Trump being arrested, and it was generated by AI. It was a fake image because you can like produce images out of nothing. Like they're unreal, really. So you can kind of like spread disinformation this way, but also they win a lot of reacts. So that's kind of like I think a game-changing kind of thing, because we are, or at least that's what I kind of understand, that we're talking about human-generated images. And for example, when you were talking about citizen journalism, I get that people like take pictures and they can also like document things. And that's kind of the uses of the images and stuff. But also, for example, I recently, I think, photojournalism prize was almost given to a guy who was documenting like pictures of a series that were AI generated pictures. So I think it kind of, I think it's really dangerous, really. Like we're no longer talking about images of what's real, and we're not documenting things. We're just like coming up with ideas of images, and images can also like order or give us a picture or a fake picture of what's going on, and also like I don't know, like gain reacts and make effects and stuff.
Good point. So I mean, I think it's also a bit of an empirical question, the extent to which these sort of generated images will be the most engaged with, gain the most interactions. We'll see. I think a lot of attention is being paid to them because of the fact that they are generated, and the question is, whether there are also at the same time quite reliable ways to detect the extent to which the image has been generated. So there's just two points on that. So the first point is is that there's a very, very large field of digital forensics, open source intelligence, digital investigations, which is dedicated to identifying, seeking to verify, identifying things, seeking to verify provenance, veracity of images. So as much as there is the prospects for generative AI, there's the prospects for detection. And it's a booming area, detection. And it's, I mean, there are sort of levels on top of it, right? So, detection. So, because a lot of the current detection software has false positives, because a lot of imagery online is, well, it has gone through post-production, so it's been touched on. So there's a lot to. So in order to see whether something has changed, I mean, what is manipulation? What is editing? Right? So I think the differentiation between the two is the big challenge. Right now, we're only seeing these really high-profile examples. I don't know if you've seen the most recent ones. Dancing in the streets. Looks really good, except the fingers. Generally, yeah, with one finger, they're not good at hands. And there are all these little small things that it's not quite good at yet. Yet there is also this discourse of improvement and progress and progression, which a lot of people actually don't. A lot of people in the field don't share this idea. So I think a lot of these questions are still. So I take it in many instances where the detection. So there's obviously a digital divide. But some images won't be run through detection software, won't be subjected to forensic analysis, or you and I won't have access to it. To see to get some sort of, and then also the software, forensic software is very complex. I mean, digital forensics in many cases is a very difficult area, and the amount of expertise. I don't know if you teach that here, but it's very difficult stuff. So it's much more difficult resizing opposed to its engagement. You're looking at things, and of course certain actors will try to obscure. It's a very complex and resource intensive area which not everyone will have access to. So that's it.
I was wondering once again, to what extent can we replicate these studies, assuming we have expertise? Because you already mentioned the language divide, and I wonder whether searching in Spanish, which is a big language which produces a lot of results in sound, would replicate the studies in English. I'm thinking about validity here, but also about things that you've mentioned, like clear partisan divides in which liberal and conservative content is clearly labeled. whereas in countries that have not a clear partisan identity, but not partisan in the sense of liberal and conservative, but more fans of a particular politician versus haters of a particular politician. So have you tried these studies in Dutch? Because if you're in Amsterdam, the variation of language is also likely to yield different results. Just an example, in one of my classes, we do an exercise. Look what Google picture has to say about the word Mexican. And then pictures of the typical cartoonish Mexican with a big hat appear. But then if you search Mexicano in Spanish, things very different emerge. And same with English and Inglés and American and Americano. So how likely are we going to get different results because of divide or difference in language? And the second thing is about the unit of analysis. Like, obviously here, what qualifies as an image? Anything? Or you mentioned that you were quite surprised about the lack of humans in many of these images. So are we able to pick in some of these studies images that contain humans only? So we can filter out all the things that are produced by designers like, I don't know, illustrations, maps, or other things. Because it seems like not too much.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the digital methods work is cross-cultural and cross-linguistic. Weren't examples in this particular presentation, but yes. And a lot of them are also language agnostic. So I think it's important to point that out as well. So studying relationship between Facebook pages and so this is something I'm sure today. We were doing a sort of 9-country study on the extent to which in post-Soviet states, whether we can identify sort of pro-Russian campaigns across 9 countries. And we do that using language agnostic techniques. So, relational analysis. So both cross-cultural approaches as well as language approaches. It does some one particular cross-cultural project, which is very interesting. That we queried all Spanish language Google domains for the word Amazonia. This was a few years ago. And we then looked at where this, so for all Latin American countries, we looked at per country where the top source was geographically. And what we found was that across Latin America, the top sources, all of the videos were actually located in Spain. So you had this sort of neo-colonial, sort of Google neo-colonialism. We also found that all the Latin American country results were basically a single result set. They didn't vary between. They were basically the same. Whereas for Spain, they were very, very different. So there was obvious kind of Spain called bias, or let's a little bit more nuanced, way that the Google reputation determination found sites from Spain more heavily. There's a lot of cross-cultural work done. It's both language specific. I'll give you lots and lots of that.
I have another question. The student, she's working with an interesting case of the governor of the state of Nuevo León, which won the election because of the influence of his wife, that was an Instagram influencer. So, well, she wants to know, how do you measure, for example, the popularity hashtags or your expertise? Yes, if it's a trending topics.
Yeah, so trending topics is something that's well, it's a Twitter term, right? It's something algorithmic which you could monitor, but you yourself cannot determine. At least I don't know if researchers have successfully reverse engineered trending topics. So the trending topics have been studied for their hijack. Certain groups of users try to make a topic trend. So that's not really so how something becomes a trend. Trending topics are, of course, no longer universal. They used to be, but they're now personalized, first by geography and then hopefully by pictures. So your trending topics might be pictures. But that put aside for a minute, on Instagram, the way one studies impact is first you have to query something. And so you can query a keyword, hashtag, or set of keywords, or set of hashtags. And then the results constitute your space of your study. And then of all of the posts, you see which ones have received the most interactions. That's how you study globally. Understand? And then you could also say, I only want to know the impact of, like, I showed you this, alt right. So then you make a list of pages. Or I want to know, this is some studies on. I want to know what animates the Rwandan diaspora.
The what?
Rwandan diaspora, or the Somali diaspora. So you make a list of pages dedicated to the diaspora, of them by list, and then you get all of the posts from all of these pages. And then you look and see which posts have received the most interactions. And then you begin to characterize them, qualify. So it depends on your research question, but for example, for diaspora studies, the question oftentimes has to do with whether the diaspora is more oriented towards the homeland or the host. So this is how people understand. This is how we say. And for the alt-right, it's like which types of ideologies or sub-ideologies animate. So that's why we have the labels. So this was the question.
So then, excuse me, but then, for example, for in the case of influencers, you can label them as you were doing this. It could be like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I might ask myself, how influential are influencers in the political space around that election. That's kind of, for me, that would be kind of interesting. Because this is the idea, the hypothesis is that this influencer was influential. Is that true?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, no, but that's a question. Yeah,
That's a question.
yeah, that's the question. And then how can we show, how can we demonstrate influence? Then the first way of demonstrating is within this political space. So we query, there'll be all these hashtags that signify the election. There'll be hashtags that signify the individual political party action leaders or candidates, right? Take a list of those, query them, get all the data back, and then make a frequency list of posts and see where the influencers are in this list, just quick. Right? And then you can then see, then that's the first step. And then you can do more complicated things and see whether or not in the political space these influencer posts are being shared. And so you can begin to sort of come up with different metrics, proxies for impact or influence. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're all set.
Okay.
And then if you have other, but like for those who are watching, if you have other questions, you can send them to me and I can ask them tomorrow.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you very
Yeah,
much
thanks
for this
coming
great
in.
enlightening. Thank you. Tomorrow at 11. The presentation of the book.
Was not today.
No.
I do have questions. The players are the same, so I.
Maestra, hoy es la.
Sí, ya, hay que
Ya, los profesores en la mañana.
So the professor talked not the same of the book.